Hello and welcome back to the AGON Institute of Sports Ministry, Theology of Sport and Competition Course. Again, students that are taking it for credit, exam quality notes please. Grab those PowerPoints now and begin to fill them out. And your personal additions to them are very important to your overall grade. We're in a series on Paul, trying to give you, the sports minister, a foundation for which you can base your interpretation of the words that he was inspired to write. We're going to go now into the book of Acts, and we're going to look at Paul's time in Athens. And I think it's going to help you understand some of who he was and what he experienced. So you have in your first slide a picture of the doorway, the gateway coming in to ancient Athens. And you see in the background the Acropolis, the Acropolis, the Acropolis city. And that was where the temple of Nike, or we call her Nike, the goddess of victory, was. Paul came to Athens. Now, if you go to Acts chapter 17, you'll see that he has been, 16, 17, you'll see he's been thrown out of Thessaloniki. He's been imprisoned and beaten in Philippi. He gets a pretty warm reception in Berea, but even then they come there and chase him out, and they put him on a ship and they send him down to Athens. And Timothy and Silas are coming a little bit later by land. He comes to Athens, and it's been tough for him. And now he walks into the city, and he's greeted at the very gate with a statue of a god, this one that you may remember from earlier slides. And this is Hermes, the Greek god that interpreted all the messages. And verse 16 says, "Now while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was painfully excited within him when he saw the city being full of idols." You see, this Jewish man, that any idol was evil, well, Athens was described as a veritable forest of idols. So he was feeling painfully agitated, feeling dirty, sinful. It might be like if you walked into a situation where it's a strip club, and I'm not talking about Kansas City Steaks, or a very smoky bar. You feel maybe oppressed by some of this. That's how Paul felt walking into this city. Athens' glory days were behind, approximately 500 BC. They produced incredible people. Three of the greatest playwrights, Sophocles, Euripides being among them. Perhaps the greatest historian of all time, Thucydides. Of course, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the great philosophers. The great buildings on the Acropolis. The art and the sculpture that has stood the time, a test of time and millennia. Language that God's own word was written in, and still today is prevalent. A government that has been the basis of governments for centuries, millennia afterwards. This is Athens. And yet, he felt agitated in his soul. Now this gives you the high city of the gods, the Acropolis. And to get to the summit at that time, someone would have to walk the marble staircase built by Claudius in AD 42 to 7 AD. So a few decades before Paul arrived. The Temple of Roman Augustus was built in 27 BC, shortly after, just a few yards from the Parthenon. So this was going on while Paul was there. Both of these would indicate to Paul that human emperors, the human rulers, were worshipped, adding to his discomfort that we're worshiping people. And so whether because of hubris, that moral decay brought on by success and wealth and pride, or because other places developed larger economies and populations, the Athens of Paul was one in decline, and this was the diminished city that Paul walked into. Now the Parthenon, The Parthenon is the temple of the Virgin you see there up on the top of those slides. You see, Athena was the virgin god. Mary is described as a Parthenon. She was the virgin that gave birth to Jesus. So being raised on the second commandment as fundamental to righteousness, that not even the splendid perfection of the Parthenon, nor the splendor of Phidias' statuary, Phidias was the man who sculpted these sculptures, could lessen Paul's strong emotion of sinfulness. An Athena's statue on the Acropolis had a gleaming spear point, golden point, that could be seen when the sun reflected on it 40 miles away. This was impressive stuff that they got into. This is a temple that was dedicated to Theseus on the opposite side of Athens from the Acropolis. This is the best preserved temple of antiquity. This is still there. You can go see today. You can see how this surrounded Paul when he walked in. Now, this is the Agora, meaning the marketplace, and some homes that were built there. This is ancient Athens. And then just beyond that, you can see between this Agora and the Acropolis in the back, you can see a basilica. This basilica was possibly built on where the original church that was in Athens. Many basilicas are built for those kind of things. There was no synagogue there with Jews, and there just weren't enough, and so the Jews would meet in the homes. Acts 17, verse 17 says that Paul reasoned with them, dialectico, meaning he used the Socratic method. And he sat and talked with them in the Agora, in these homes. And Paul's evangelism in Athens was modeled after the city's historic Socratic method. So he would go to the Agora every day to encounter those who happened to be there, entering into conversation with them. He would always direct the conversation to Jesus. Compare 1 Corinthians 9, 19 and following. To the Jew I became a Jew, to the Greek I became a Greek. And this is what he was doing, and this is where he would do it, in this Agora area of ancient Athens. He would go even to those who had worshipped other gods. He would go to the marketplace. He would meet daily. You see that in the 6th and even the 7th slide that you've been provided. But in verse 18 he says, but some of the Epicureans, the philosopher Epicurus, said that pleasure is the chief end of life, pleasure. And most desired is tranquility, being free from pain, disturbing passions, and fear. Now, the Epicureans were good examples of the diminished philosophers. From Socrates, high watermark, to the life of debauchery. They believed the world came into being by chance, not brought about by gods, and they neither cared for the world nor the people of the world, and that in death a person's constituent atoms just dispersed into the cosmos, and they ceased to exist. This is the home of these Epicureans. Well, we're going to take a break here. We're going to come back to Corinth, and we're going to pick up more about some of the other philosophies and how Paul did his evangelism. So stay tuned. We'll be right back in our next section of this Theology of Sport and Competition class.